Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We're going to dive into AWS SCP service control policies, and we're actually going to write some with Christophe and Sandy. My name's Joseph. What that means is I'll be your host, which really just means I'm going to answer all sorts of questions as they come into the chat on the side. Make sure that Sandy and Christophe can tell you everything about SCPs and focus on the session, and we'll bring in those questions as we go. You'll see that Q&A in that chat on the far side. And in fact, I'm actually going to test the chat on the side real quick right now and share a link to the GitHub repo to copy and paste in a little bit as we get going. And actually, let's do one more thing for anyone that's on the session right now. We actually created a cloud security game earlier last month. If you could describe your last audit with only a movie genre, what genre would it be? Comedy, horror? What would you describe your last audit to be? Drop it in the chat on that right side as we get started here. As a reminder, we're also giving away some SCPs at the very end. We'll bring those back at the very end of the session and bring it back up to share with you again one more time. Feel free to copy those at any point. It is 2024, so yes, this webinar is being recorded, and we will make it available to everyone afterwards between Sandy, Christophe, and ourselves. We'll make sure everyone has access to that recording. Thank you, Adrian. Enough of me talking. Let's get the session started. I'm going to pass it over here to Sandy, our CTO and co-founder at Sonrai Security, along with Christophe, founder of Cybr, where he shares how to build AWS cloud security skills with his own company, Cybr. With that, Sandy, I'll pass it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Joseph, and welcome, Christophe. I'm super excited to have Christophe with us today. He is a professional trainer compared to me. I probably talk too fast to train people anyway. So again, welcome, Christophe. Super happy to have you here. Christophe and I will hand kind of controls back and forth throughout this kind of session as we go. This is part of a previous webinar we did on some SCPs. And so we thought we'd just do like 1 or 2 minutes just to kind of summarize what that was before we get into the details of people actually writing SCPs. And in this actual webinar with Christophe, you're going to write them live in your own AWS account, which should be a lot of fun. Similar to that link that's in the chat, there's a QR code here, which will take you to the same GitHub repositories. So that's kind of our agenda for today. Christophe is going to attempt to do 5 SCPs today, explain how they work, how to drop them in, and how to test them in your accounts. We may run out of time, depending on how fast everyone kind of types and things. And then, we may have questions along the way, and that may slow us down. But that's okay. If we don't get through them all, again, we will have the GitHub repo there and instructions for each one of them. And if we have to record 5 minutes after, we will do that. There is a little bit of a summary from the last webinar, which is interesting. I assume if you're here, you know what an SCP is. You're going to write things in JSON syntax today in building these policies. AWS can be a little bit of a stickler on that, and you need to do it properly, which is why copy and paste may work well out of the GitHub repo, so that if you run into a problem with a comma or a bracket or something in the wrong spot, that should help you out. Don't get too frustrated with it, though. Usually we can help correct those. It's interesting when you actually do this. SCPs are applied in part of your OU structure in the AWS organization, and they actually do not work in the organization account. So in order to actually deploy these, you're going to deploy them in the organization account, but they need to affect an account that is not your organization account. So it's important as you're applying these to understand that and know that the account you're going to work in and do the testing is not the account that you're applying the SCPs in, which is important. We can talk about allows and denies. Almost everything we're doing today are deny policies, which inherit down the tree. So if you put them at the top, they apply to all accounts. If you put them at an OU, they apply to all of the accounts below that. And in the previous webinar, we talked a lot about the limits of these things. You can only attach 5 per account, and they can only be so large. I'm not going to go through all the limitations today. In the previous webinar, there's some great compression ideas about how to make them smaller. So if you're running out of space with SCPs, refer to that webinar and it will teach you how to make them smaller. Today, we're just doing small ones anyway. They should fit no problem, assuming you're in an account that's fairly wide open. Should work quite well on that side. We always say these are invisible to the member accounts. So it's kind of interesting when you're working in an account and you're getting blocked by one of these SCPs. You may not know that it's what SCP it is that's blocking you, and you can't see the SCPs. You'll just get a kind of an cryptic deny message from CloudTrail or in your CLI. And so sometimes it's hard to tell. Again, this will help you decode some of these. Most of them have a a deny message that says denied by a service control policy in the CloudTrail message. So a couple things from the last webinar, just quickly. Again, some strengths of these are they really do work well as guardrails. If you don't want people turning off your CloudTrail, there's a way that you can basically stop that from ever happening using one of these SCPs, even if it's in one of your 1,000 accounts, and it fixes it everywhere. I think my very first use case ever with SCPs was actually stopping the creation of net new CloudTrails because the second one cost money. And we ran into lots of problems with testing in our orgs in the early days where people kept creating multiple CloudTrails and it was driving our bill up. And so we used an SCP to stop that. We use them a lot more for security related tasks than cost related tasks now, but some great strengths in doing that. It's also great for, basically taking sensitive permissions and just ring fencing them so only certain identities can use them. We have a really interesting, more complex use case as the 5th use case, which really deals with separation of duties, which is a really fun one. Hopefully we get to it today. But there are some kind of weaknesses in these things. They don't do certain things that you would expect them to do. They don't, as an example, work on the management account. They don't actually protect service linked roles. We have so many customers that pull their hair out on service linked roles and say, man, AWS really over permissioned this thing. I'd like to take control of it using SCPs or, fixing its policy. And you just can't do that in a lot of cases. And you also have to be careful, a lot of cases, if you're using certain conditions and stuff in them, those will require changes to the resources in the accounts to make those things apply. So again, just some interesting strengths and weaknesses as we go by here. Certainly refer to the previous webinar if you're interested in the tips and different scenarios that we're going to cover today. But Christophe is going to go through each one of these as we go, and we'll guide us through this. So quick checklist for everybody. You need to be able to log into your AWS management account. That's where you're going to deploy the SCPs. Most likely, if you're logging into that account, you're already way over privileged and have administrator access anyway. If not, you're at least going to have to be able to control the organization's API when you get there. You need a sub account hanging off your organization somewhere, which is a sandbox account that you can play in and test things in. That's also, however you're going to log into that is fine. Christophe will walk us through logging into his accounts to get us started, and we will go from there. So Christophe, I'm going to start handing it over to you now. So I'm actually going to stop sharing, and hopefully you can take control from this point.
Let's try it out, see if it works.
Let's see. By the way, while Christophe is sharing his screen, I just want to say again, Christophe has his own training company and does this every day. So he's a good guide to walk you through this.
Also, on that note, I think it's important to point out that we have a unique requirement and use case because, let me make sure this is screen sharing before I go on my little story there. Because we do training and we provide hands-on labs where learners can go in, they can click a button, it launches that lab environment for them. And we teach AWS security. So we have a lot of different scenarios, including things like privilege escalation attacks. So we'll actually give that environment, they'll go in and they can perform that privesk in our own AWS environments. And so I say that's a unique case study because most organizations are trying to keep people out of their AWS accounts. They don't want complete strangers logging into their environments. I'm the complete opposite. I want you to go in there, even if I've never met you before. I don't know who you are, where you're at. Doesn't matter. Come on in. Let's practice some AWS security privilege escalation attacks. So we've had to get very, very good at IAM permissions and also SCPs because when we get it wrong, we end up with a really large bill. We've had people, not at Cybr, but at a prior training company that I was at, launch very, very massive EC2 mining for cryptocurrency mining instances where we wake up the next day and we have thousands of dollars in our billing account. So we've had to get very good at locking that down and making sure it doesn't happen. And so I'll be sharing some of that experience and expertise in this presentation today as we build actual SCPs and go from there. So yeah, a little bit of a unique situation there. Most people are not doing that. But so if you're familiar with Identity Center, I've set that up in my account and that's how I'm going to log in. You don't have to log in using Identity Center. That was not a prerequisite for this conversation. You can log in with your admin user. You can authenticate through a role, whatever you want. I'm just explaining why you're seeing multiple different accounts here. You will need admin access or you will need access to write SCPs through AWS organizations. So definitely make sure that you're using a higher privilege account for this. Now, I will say a few different things I want to mention before we dive into the hands-on stuff. One, if you did not get a chance to complete some of those checklists or items in the checklist, I should say. So if you don't have AWS organizations already enabled and ready to go, or if you don't have a second or third account that you can practice with, please don't do that now. It will distract from the goal of this presentation. This will be recorded. So just go ahead and pay attention to what we're doing today, and then you can go back and do that after the presentation. Also, I highly recommend that you don't just copy and paste what we're doing into a production environment right away. We're going to explain these in depth so you'll understand the impact of it, but it's still very smart to practice this against sandbox environments like I have here before you take them and put them into production. You know, the Sonrai team did a great job of writing these SCPs to be almost lift and shift, right? Where they're very copy paste friendly, but they can't think of every possible use case that you have going on in your organization. So that's a pretty big disclaimer that I want to get out of the way before we get started. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you did get a chance to complete that checklist, then you will have AWS organizations already enabled. I'm just going to quickly walk through my org structure. You do not need this org structure. It can just be 2 accounts. It doesn't matter. All you really need is that management account that Sandy was talking about earlier, where you've enabled AWS organizations, and then you need at least 1 other AWS account. I've got multiple in here. Like I said, you don't need all these accounts. This is completely overkill for what we're doing today, but you need at least a second AWS account. And so I'll be using this demo account right here to practice and test these SCPs and show the impact that they have. So if you have this and you've enabled AWS organizations, the next step you'll need to take is to enable service control policies. And you can do that by going over to the policies tab, on the left-hand side, and make sure that this is enabled here. Before I go into that and get started, I'm just going to pause here just for a minute or two to make sure that everybody's able to log in to their account and they're able to catch up before we go ahead and actually write any of these. And if there's any questions so far about getting started with AWS organizations or getting into this page here, let me know. I'll be happy to walk you through that.
It's interesting. We find, Christophe, that a lot of people don't have these turned on when they set up like a brand new test account, right? And they're off by default. So you have to go in and do all this work.
Oh, yeah.
When you work with actual organizations using all this stuff, it's already all set up and on because people have already been in there. But I find when we do test accounts, we run into these kind of first steps you have to make sure you complete.
That's a really good point. And maybe people who are attending today don't have access to this in their organization. Maybe it's managed by somebody else, so they've never actually been in this panel before. Luckily, organizations is very simple and straightforward as a service. It's not one of those complex services that has 100 different things you can do in it, right? You only have a handful of links over here. The settings are relatively straightforward. So it's a lot easier to navigate through. But hopefully everybody is on the same page here. Again, like I said, if you don't have AWS organizations enabled, or if you don't have multiple AWS accounts, don't worry about it for now. Just stick around, check out what we're doing, and then you can do it after the presentation. So once you've enabled service control policies, go ahead and navigate into it if it didn't already take you to this screen here. And the first thing you'll notice is that we already have an available policy on this screen after we enable service control policies. And that's because you have to have at least 1 SCP at all times. And so AWS pre-creates this full AWS access policy. You will see it is an AWS managed policy that allows access to every operation. So this is our starting point. We'll start with this policy here, and then we'll create some other ones that basically work with this one to limit permissions and set up those guardrails that Sandy was talking about previously. So if we click on that full AWS access service policy, again, they'll remind you that it's a managed policy, which means that you cannot edit this policy. It is locked in. We can't modify the tags. We can't modify the content or anything like that. The reason that this exists and the reason that it's applied to every single account that you have in your organization, including all the organizational units and including root, though as we know, it's not applying to the management account. The reason they do this is because SCPs follow a deny by default approach. What that means is we're not actually granting access to full admin for every identity or every resource that's being launched in all of those target accounts. That's not what SCPs do. They don't actually grant permissions. They set up guardrails to limit the maximum allowed permissions in our member accounts. So instead of this saying everything, every identity or resource you create in those accounts will be full admin, do whatever you want with it. Instead, what this is saying is if we didn't have this allow policy, then everything would be implicitly denied. That's why they have to create this when you enable SCPs, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do anything at all in your member accounts. Everything would be implicitly denied. That's kind of what they mean by the deny by default approach. And if that doesn't necessarily make sense right now, I think it'll make a little bit more sense as we build out our first SCP, which we're about to do in just a second here. So that's why we're starting by looking at this one, even though we haven't written this one yet. This is very important because if we don't have something like this, then we don't even need explicit denies at that point. Nothing will be allowed anyway. Also, this is a good template to get started with because, as you'll notice, if you're familiar with IAM policies in general, this looks like a regular identity-based policy or even some resource-based policies, right? We have a version number, we have a statement, an effect of allow or deny, an action, and then a resource where we can specify everything, or we can specify an Amazon resource name. So we could use this as our starting point, but to make it a lot easier, the folks at Sonrai created these awesome 5 free SCPs that we're going to be using today. So if you haven't seen this link yet, it's going to be in the chat on the webinar software there. You can go ahead and click on that link, and it should take you to this page here. And we're going to create these exact SCPs, but we're not going to create them in order. So don't start with number 1. We're actually going to start with SCP number 2. Go ahead and navigate to that one, and we'll take a look at what it does. We'll explain it a little bit. We'll copy it. We'll put it in our account, and then we'll test it out, make sure that it works. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these, or some of these that we're looking at today, they're what we can call the easy no-brainers, right? You could probably copy and paste this into production, and it would probably be a very good thing, unless you have an extreme use case or something where your organization does not want this. But a lot of times this is going to be an easy no-brainer that you would want to copy and paste in production after testing it thoroughly in your environments. The reason for that is because it's going to block tampering of very important security controls. We all use CloudTrail if we're in Amazon Web Services, and so we want something like CloudTrail Stop Logging or CloudTrail Delete Trail. Sandy gave the example earlier of they wanted to prevent creating new trails. We're not blocking creating trails here. So if that's something that, as you were listening, you're like, oh yeah, that'd be great for preventing costs going out of control, you could go ahead and modify this policy and add that action in here as well. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to prevent people from stopping logging or from deleting our CloudTrail trails from our member accounts. And so that's very important. Same thing with EC2 deleting flow logs. So if you're using VPC flow logs, you want to prevent deletion of that. This will be very effective at it. Or logs for CloudWatch logs, where we want to prevent deleting things like log groups or log streams. Or if we're using GuardDuty for threat detection, we have all these actions here that we can prevent with this service control policy. Same thing with organizations leaving organization. Once you have member accounts in your AWS organization, you want to prevent them from leaving. If a threat actor gets access or an insider threat actor gets access and they try to leave your organization, you want to prevent that from happening. And then finally in here, they put S3 put bucket public access block, which will prevent modifying the public access block permissions on or for S3 buckets, which helps prevent accidentally or maliciously opening up our S3 buckets to the open internet. So let's go ahead and copy this guy, and then let's go back in to our AWS account. We'll scroll up back to the prior page of service control policies. And then once you're on this page, we're going to go ahead and click on create policy. So for this one, you can give it any name that you want, really. They have some restrictions at the bottom that you can read through, but typically, as long as you're just using letters and numbers, you should be fine. You can also capitalize stuff. And so for this one, what we could do is we could name it block tampering of security controls. I like very descriptive names. We can also give it a description. I don't want to type too much here and spend too much time on it, but we could do something like block tampering with security controls and services like CloudTrail, CloudWatch, GuardDuty, etc. Right? Try to be as descriptive as you can so that as other people come in here and try to make modifications, or 6 months later, you can quickly look at this at a glance and know what's going on. We can also use tags, which are very effective for organization and also for other security measures. I'm going to skip that just for this demonstration, but I would encourage you to tag these SCPs as well. And then below that, again, if you're familiar with IAM policies, this is very, very similar to that. And you recognize the GUI, the GUI that we have here. You can just copy and paste in here. You could also use the GUI to include other services or include other actions and conditions, things like that. So very, very similar to what we've seen with IAM policies in general. So go ahead and copy and paste that in this editor right here. And then we'll go ahead and save it, or create policy rather. I'll wait for a second just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and also to check and see if there's any questions so far.
It's also interesting, Christophe, I think, as people are doing this, this is a great test, and you should always test these things. If you use other Amazon security tools, you're using, Detective, or you're using Inspector, or there's a half a dozen of these things. Each one of them have similar lists of things where you've configured some control that you don't want removed. And this is a great way to stop that. I always do tell people to be careful of some of these ones where the same permission is the thing that turns the thing on and turns the thing off. And if you end up in those permissions, you have to be careful, because once you've done this, you can never turn it on if you block it in the SCP, right? And so you need to make sure it's something that gets bootstrapped before the SCP gets applied. We didn't put those in these particular ones because we didn't want to break anybody. But if you really get into this in practice, there's other services and things which are really good to do this with as well.
And I'm seeing some good comments too, where it goes to show that everybody's use case is different, because somebody mentioned, hey, this might, the S3 bit and the logs might conflict with Terraform modules, or if you're using AWS Control Tower, you're going to conflict with some of that as well. So it really does depend on what you're running and or how your organization is structured. That's why I recommend starting off in a completely separate account, like in this case, a personal account or something like that, if you're just practicing, then going to your organization practice accounts. And then once you've thought through all of that, like what you mentioned, Sandy, some of those edge cases, that's the thing with SCPs, also at IAM policies in general, but just trying to think a few steps ahead and being very methodical about why are we blocking this? What do we need to block? What do we need to run, et cetera, and involving teams that this is going to affect as well. But one thing that is kind of silly in this interface, at least in my opinion, I think they could have improved this flow a little bit. Once you create the policy, it just kind of spits you back out into this page here. And so you think, okay, cool, I've created the policy, I'm good to go. It's effective, it's applied to my accounts, all is well. But that's not how that works. It creates the policy, but it doesn't actually apply it yet. So we have to then click on the policy name itself. Or, if you're doing this through the CLI or API, of course, you can automate a lot of this. But if you're doing it through the AWS console, don't forget you actually have to attach this policy to the target accounts that you want to affect. So if we go over to targets within that policy, we can then click on the attach button right here. And then we'll see our organizational structure where we have root at the very top. I have my infrastructure organizational unit, sandbox OU, security, suspended, workloads, and then my management account. Now, because of this type of policy that we're dealing with right now, really, this is probably a policy that I want to apply at the root level, because I would want this to apply to every single account that I have in my organization. You may be different. You may look at this and say, well, we have sandbox environments for our development team. I want my development team or my security team to be able to practice turning off CloudTrail, practice deleting logs, whatever it is. So in that case, you may want to exclude sandbox environments from that. But again, you have to be very methodical about that, because if you exclude it, you have to keep in mind that you are opening up some potential security gaps. But in this case, for this particular policy, we're going to go ahead and select root. And then again, I want to reiterate, this is kind of a bad design in my opinion, because as Sandy said, this is not going to actually apply to the management account, but it makes it look like it is. It checks that box next to it. So keep in mind, this is actually not being effective on our management account. It's only going to apply to all of our OUs and all of our accounts when we select the root there. So now we can go ahead and attach this policy. And now this service control policy is effective against every single target that we can see in here, which is going to be our root. And it's going to trickle down to all of those OUs and all of those accounts. So on that note, let's try it. Let's make sure that I'm not just making things up. Let's make sure that it actually works and is effective as I claim that it is. If you create accounts through AWS organizations, then by default, AWS is going to spin up a role for you. You can use that to jump back and forth between your various accounts. If you have Identity Center, then you can use permission sets to do that instead. But I'm not going to assume that you are using Identity Center. So instead, I'm going to use the default account, or excuse me, the default role that AWS creates in your member accounts. So the way that we can do this is we can go up in the top right corner, click on your username, and then we'll click on switch role. From that point on, I'm going to copy and paste a lot, by the way, because I'm notorious for typos, and then I spend half the time of a webinar trying to fix my typos. But we'll go ahead and paste in that role that's automatically created for you. Again, if you have a different role you'd rather use, please do that. You do not have to use this role that I have in here. So it's going to be, and zoom in, I'll zoom in a little bit to make it easier to read. It's going to be organization account access role. And then you'll want to paste in your account ID. So if you remember, I'm using my account that's called demo here. So whoops, I did not copy and paste that. So we're going to use this account ID right here because that's my demo account. Your account ID, of course, is going to be different. So make sure that you're using the correct one and then paste that in under account ID. Then put in the IAM role name. You can change the display name if you want. You don't have to. And then we'll just do red for our color. Let's be bold today. And then I'll go ahead and click on switch role. So from this point on, if we go back to our SCP that we created, again, remember, we are doing stuff with CloudTrail, with EC2, with GuardDuty. I don't have GuardDuty in this account. I've got CloudTrail, but I don't really want to mess with that. So what I'll do is I'll mess with the CloudWatch logs, and I'll attempt to delete a log group that exists in this account. So I'll go over to CloudWatch, and then I'll navigate to log groups. You can see I've got a couple of log groups in here. And if I try to select one of them, and then I go to actions and delete log group, and if I try to delete it, then we'll get an X message. If I exit out of that, we'll get our access denied error banner at the very top. And we can see that it says the following log groups could not be deleted. It'll specify the log group that I tried to delete, and it'll say that I'm not authorized to perform this action with an explicit deny in a service control policy. So by adding those explicit denies, it doesn't matter if I'm an admin level user or role, which in this case, I am an admin level role. Doesn't matter. I still cannot perform this action in this account because of the SCP. So that SCP really sits at the top there. And because we're applying it to all of our accounts, we're saying, I don't care who you are. I don't care how powerful of a user or resource you are. You cannot do this in our member accounts. That's why SCPs are so incredibly powerful. They really can help add defense in depth, right? They add that extra layer of security. So even if you misconfigure something within an individual account, you've got that fail-safe, you've got that guardrail that can step in and say, nope, still not going to allow you to do that.
Hey, Christophe, while you pause here for a second, and Sandy, Christophe, both of you, we've got a question that came in. I'm curious if or how much overlap you have with the SCPs we're talking about here versus what you would get using something like Control Tower.
For this one, you should get I would hope you get pretty decent overlap with Control Tower for this one. If we make it to number 5, where we're talking about separation of duties, you won't see anything like that in Control Tower because it requires some knowledge of your organization and how you actually run things. And so it's not a default checkbox that you can kind of just turn on. But some of these early ones, you should see a similar, in terms of their defaults, there should be similar ones in there for like not being able to stop CloudTrail and things like that. I haven't looked at the list of Control Tower ones recently, but they've been adding stuff to it. So I assume that they're in there. I don't know, Christophe, off the top of your head if these ones are in there or not.
No, I'd have to check, honestly. Yeah, that's a really good question. Control Tower is very opinionated. So if you're using it as an organization, I'd highly recommend that you deep dive into documentation and check and look at their quirks, because Control Tower introduces a lot of these quirks that don't otherwise apply. So that's a good comment. I appreciate you mentioning that in the crowd. That's super helpful.
It's also,
Adrian. Go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
I was going to say the error message that here is kind of good to train your users on too, because when they're getting denied by a service control policy, there's almost nothing they can do in the account to fix that. Even if they have, star permissions in the account, they can't adjust their own roles to fix and go around this. So it's a great thing also to just train your users on that. If you're seeing this, you got to go talk to the cloud infrastructure team or whoever it happens to be. It's unfortunate, as AWS has its own quirks. It is not always this message. Some services, honestly, more of the older services like S3 has some that don't actually tell you you're being blocked by a service control policy. When you get blocked, it just says access denied. So anyway, 90% of them do say this, which is really good and helpful. There's a few exceptions, but.
Two last things I'll jump in here on that. I'm seeing Adrian said friends don't let friends apply SCPs to root. And then another one, don't apply the SCP without giving the control tower user the permissions it needs to do what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Two good caveats there that I wanted to share with the team. Awesome. Christophe, thank you, sir. Back to you.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the next one. Let's do another SCP, and it's going to be a little bit different this time. So I'll switch back to the prior account our management account where we're applying the SCPs. And then we'll go back to AWS organizations, back to policies and service control policies. For this second one here, we're going to go over to number 3. So it's going to be 3-uphold security best practices. So go ahead and navigate to that one. I'll give you a second here, and then we'll walk through what this one does. In fact, I'll go ahead and copy and paste it in here as you're doing that, because we can always walk through it within this console here. Oops. I'll just name it Uphold Security Best Practices. And then I'll skip the description, right? You know what a description is. We went through a more detailed one earlier, so I'll just skip that for the sake of time. But please, please, please use descriptions. It's very important. It's good security hygiene and just general organizational hygiene. But to walk through this one really quickly, this is very simple, very straightforward. We only have 3, 4, 5. We only have 5 actions in this one. The first action is going to be create default subnet. The second one is create default VPC. The third is create user or IAM create user, and then IAM create access key. And then finally, EC2 disable EBS encryption by default. All these are going to be explicitly denied. So this policy essentially tells us that we are going probably to delete our default VPCs because we don't want default VPCs in our accounts. And also we don't want them to be able to get created. We don't want to be able to create IAM users or create access keys. And we also don't want to be able to disable EBS encryption by default. Now, some of you may be looking at this and you're like, whoa, hold up. You're going to prevent me from creating users and access keys? What is this? What are you doing? So ideally, you're moving away from creating IAM users and creating long-term access keys, and you're moving more towards using things through Identity Center with single sign-on, right? Maybe you have Active Directory, you're hooking it up to that, and so you're managing your users outside of AWS and or within Identity Center instead of using these long-term users that live within IAM and then creating access keys for those users. Ideally, you're moving away from that. Now, realistically, I know a lot of organizations still rely on users. They have to create them. They still rely on access keys. It's going to take a few months, 2 years to transition away from doing that because for many, many years, that's just how we did it in AWS. But more and more, it's important to try to move away from that. So I love this policy for that reason, because it's going to help us get into that mindset. Now, it's not going to prevent you from using existing users, kind of like what Sandy was mentioning earlier, where you may have some situations where maybe you've already created users. You just want to prevent the creation of more users being added to those accounts as you start your transition away from IAM users to Identity Center users, for example. So let's go ahead and create this one. We'll test it out. And then this time, like the comment mentioned, friends don't let friends apply these to root. What we'll do is instead, we'll go in here, and for the targets, let's say that as our scenario, I got together with my security team. We're part of a large organization, and we've decided that one of our initiatives is to move away from creating IAM users, but we're not quite ready to do that organizational wide. So instead, we're going to start practicing doing that in our sandbox accounts to get a better idea of the impact that this will have down the road. And so instead of applying it to every single OU, or instead of applying it to just individual accounts within Sandbox, I can go ahead and select the entire OU, and it will trickle down from there, and it will apply to this containers account, this demo account, and this example account. As another example, if I just wanted to do it for the demo account, of course, I can just select that demo account. I don't have to select an entire OU. But typically, unless it's just for a very specific use case or for a temporary scenario, usually you don't want to apply SCPs to just individual accounts because SCPs are meant to be account-wide, right, and applying to multiple different accounts. So in this case, let's just go ahead and select the entire Sandbox OU, and let's go ahead and attach this policy. And same thing, we're going to jump back in to our other account. I'll use the exact same role and an account ID. And then we'll navigate over to IAM. I'll go to users. I'll try to create a user. We'll just name this one Sandy. And then we'll go next. Doesn't matter what you try to attach, because in theory, we should get denied. And then I'll just go ahead and create user. And there you go. Again, user was not created. User Sandy, or you cannot create user Sandy with an explicit deny in a service control policy. If we tried to create an access key for an existing user, right? So if I did have an existing user in here, I'd go in there and try to create an access key for them. I would get a similar error message. If I try to create default VPC, similar message. And if I try to disable EBS encryption by default, then again, I would get a similar message. So these are two fairly simple, straightforward SCPs that you can take and you can customize to your own needs, right? If maybe you don't, or maybe you're not ready to stop creation of access keys, in that case, maybe stop creation of users as a step one, or vice versa, stop creation of access keys. That's probably an easier one to do first. And then move on to adding stop creation of users, right? These are meant to be customizable, not necessarily just copy and paste and then move on with your day. Go ahead and grab them and modify them to your own use case and needs. Does that make sense? Any questions?
It makes sense, Christophe. And I think the other thing that's interesting about this structure of this one versus the first one was very much a deny thing, right? Like deny, disabling CloudTrail, deleting the log group or whatever. This one's very much you've put your cloud in a good state. Maybe you managed to pass a CIS benchmark on one account or whatever it is, and you don't want them to put back all the things that you destroyed to get to the CIS benchmark pass. This is a great way to, basically block those things that you don't want to show up from that point forward. But it's a little less destructive in some ways because the old things still work. If there is a default VPC already running in that account, it continues to work. It doesn't break that VPC. It's only the creation of net new ones. And so sometimes these are actually quite safe to apply, actually. If you've kind of, we've got some stuff we have to clean up, but we don't want the problem to get any worse, you can use these SCPs to kind of stop the next one from happening. And then, then you've got the backlog you got to go through and clean up the mess that's already there. But we find them quite effective for that.
Absolutely. I like how you mentioned that. I think, or in my experience, there's very little that's more effective than instead of just saying, all right, we're going to move away from using X. Go ahead and make sure everybody's on the same page, but go ahead and actually implement that. And then that's going to be a very effective way to move away from using X, but you can chip away at it. You don't have to go draconian about it and just like, all right, you can no longer do these 100 things you used to do before. You can just say, all right, starting tomorrow or starting next month, you can no longer do these 3 things. And then 2 months later, we're going to start blocking these. And that way everybody's on the same page. They have time to move away from it and rewire their ways of doing things. So I think that's a very effective approach to doing that for sure. We're running a little bit low on time here. I'm trying to be conscious that I think we have about 7 minutes or so. I was going to look at enforcing encryption of files next, but I don't have a great way to test that one. I tried testing it in the console and it didn't really work in my favor. So instead of spending a ton of time trying to test that one, I'll skip it over to the next one, which is going to be preventing perimeter breaches. I think you also brought that up a few moments ago here. So we'll go to, where is it?
It may be interesting, Christophe, if you, just before you flip to this one, if you just bring the SCP up for that encryption one and just show how I think it's a condition statement that's on it. If we go down, yes, you could just, you'll find in AWS, there are certain permissions or certain activities that you would like to block, but there's no direct permission to block them. As an example, in this case, uploading a file that's not encrypted. And you'll find similar things with some of the like pre-signed URL examples where it's like the S3 one, there's no like direct permission that says I'm creating an S3 pre-signed URL, but there's a way you can use a condition to make it not do that behavior. And so we find the conditions are actually very powerful in the SCPs. And again, every permission has a slight different variance in how these things are set up. But the format of this SCP could be used for many of those permissions. You just need to make sure that you get the right permission and the right condition in there for doing it. So
that's a really good point. And I'm glad you guys included some conditions in here, because the first 2 we looked at, very straightforward. It doesn't have any special conditions or anything like that. The last 3 start to ramp up a little bit in complexity. So here we have some conditions that are checking whether headers are null. If they're not null, what kind of encryption is being used? Is it AES 256? We're using KMS or KMS DSSE. If not, then we want to deny S3 put object. And then same thing for this one here with the pre-signed URLs that you just brought up. And this is going to be the next one we test out. Here we have 2 actions. Well, 3 actions, I should say. We have the first action for SageMaker, create pre-signed domain URL. And then we have 2 actions for Lambda. So here we can't necessarily, like you said, we can't block that S3, or not S3, that Lambda pre-signed URL, but we can control the creation and updating of that function URL configuration with a condition. So we can say, we do not want to allow creating function URL configs or Lambda function URL configs on any of our functions if we are not requiring AWS IAM authentication. So if you're not familiar with what's going on here, a function URL is basically just a dedicated HTTPS endpoint for your Lambda function. So you can use that to send it to people or to applications, and they can access that function through that function URL. So it kind of acts as that S3 pre-signed URL, but essentially for the AWS Lambda function. There are 2 ways that you can create those functions, and we'll see this in the console in just a second. One is by requiring AWS IAM authentication. So if somebody needs to be authenticated against their identity or role or whatever they're using to be able to access this endpoint. Or this could be set to none, in which case it acts like an S3 pre-signed URL. There's no password required, no authentication required. You can send that function URL to anyone, and somebody in Europe could access it without ever authenticating to your or to their account or anything like that. So that can be very dangerous if misconfigured. There are some use cases where you want that, but a lot of times you don't want that. And so this SCP will help us protect against that. So let's go ahead and put it in here, and let's demonstrate what I'm talking about instead of just theorizing about it. So we'll say prevent perimeter breaches. Again, I'll skip the description. Please don't skip descriptions in general. And then we'll paste this in here. We'll go ahead and create this guy. And then we'll apply it, in this case, just to demonstrate that it works. I'll just apply it to my single demo account. So I won't select the OU. I'll just select my demo account. I'll attach this policy, and we should be good to go. I'll go back into that account. I've already created a test Lambda function. So you could quickly create a Lambda function if you don't already have one. They have blueprints. I just use their Hello World Python blueprint. We can go in here. And then if we scroll down to configuration, you'll see general config, triggers, permissions, etc. You want to scroll down to function URL, and then you'll click on function URL. And then we'll go ahead and create that. And as I was just talking about, you have 2 auth types that you can select from: AWS IAM, where only authenticated IAM users and roles can make requests to your function URL, or none, where there will be no IAM authentication performed on requests to your function URL. So if I try to create this, even as an admin role, I'll get my access denied. It'll say you don't have permissions to create function URL. To request access, copy the following text and send it to your AWS administrator. In this case, it still gives you a lot of information, which is helpful. It still tells you, hey, a service control policy is explicitly denying this action. So you could send that to your admin, and they could look at it and see if it's a legitimate use case, and then potentially give you that exception. But because we have that condition, again, remember this condition right here. So it says condition string not equals to Lambda function URL auth type of AWS IAM. So because we selected none, this evaluated to string equals none. So because the string did not equal to AWS IAM, it denied the action. But if the string does equal AWS IAM, which we can do by changing it to this, if I now click save, then I will be allowed to create that function URL because I selected the auth type of AWS IAM. So with SCPs, it's not always just black and white. You can have some exceptions. You can have some situations where, yes, of course, you want to enable your development team to have access to function URLs. You just want to force them to create them properly following security best practices and not just making them open to the entire internet. Anything to add to that, Sandy?
The one thing, this great example, and I think if you look at the, and you may want to flip back over to the GitHub for 1 second. If you looked at this policy, you can see there's only kind of one statement in the conditions. You get string not equal Lambda function auth type IAM. If you go to the other one, you'll notice that there were 3 encryption types that were allowed. And so what's interesting about these statements are inside these stanzas, this is ORed. So AES-256 or KMS or DS. But you must have both conditions to be true. So the null encryption side false and this type have to both be true, I think, for this to work, right? Christophe, if I got my orders proper.
For these,
yeah.
Or did you mean for these?
So basically the null condition and the next one, which is the string not equals, both must be true. However, any one of the three encryption types are kind of ORed together. So each condition you put, so every standard you put in the condition must be each one. However, within one, it's ORed, I believe, if I'm correct in my orders.
Yeah, you don't have to have, right? If you have AES-256, you're good to go. You don't also have to have DSSE enabled. But yes, because in this case, this is checking to see if the header is null. So if you're kind of thinking through the evaluation of that, right? If this is null, then this doesn't really matter because this is null. So there's nothing in there. However, if it's not null, if it is set, if we have that header being sent over, then we will check to see if it's using the correct encryption that we want to allow. And in that case, if it's using one of these, then go ahead and allow it. Otherwise, let's go ahead and deny it. Absolutely.
I think the mistake I've seen people make, they try to do like two controls in conditions together, where it's like, I want to check for an attribute-based tag, or I want to check for a name, and they put both of them in, and what it means is they both have to be true. They're trying to do an or, right? And so you just have to be careful with the way that you write those. Sometimes you have to split your statements up to get that type of effect. So,
and actually, I know we're running over time here, so I'll just briefly say this, and then we can start to wrap up. But this one, it kind of broke my brain for a minute. I mentioned this in private with Sandy. I'll mention it here as well, because there's a double negative. So we have not action and then string not like. So kind of piggybacking off what you're talking about, these can get very complex very quickly, because if you're looking at a bunch of policies and you start having double negatives and you start having ands or you start having ors, this can turn into a nightmare very, very quickly. This can be fairly difficult to write at a larger scale, especially.
There's also this kind of interesting balance between writing SCPs versus IAM policies. Some of this like double and triple negative stuff in an IAM policy, we actually recommend people don't do, because the complexity of it may be granting permissions that you never intended if you're doing it in an IAM policy. But because SCPs are only ever taking stuff away, they're not granting any net new permissions, it's safer to use some of this double and triple negative language without getting yourself in trouble. You still really have to understand what they do, but you're not going to accidentally grant to every, we use the example in the IAM policies when you use not action IAM star, and what you actually did was grant them every other possible permission in AWS except that. That's not going to happen to you in an SCP. It does happen in the IAM policy language. So again, just other things, you'll see these, and if you've been doing CSPM checks for a while and they're like, oh, you can never use those combinations together, don't do that. Sometimes that's actually quite safe to do in an SCP, where in an IAM policy, it's probably a no-no.
So at this point, should we go ahead and open it up to Q&A? Should we keep going with showing examples of this being applied? What do we think?
I think we can probably we've only got 12 minutes left. I'm sure there'll be one or two questions. You and I can kind of, spend a little time discussing too. Joseph, any more questions in the chat or in the Q&A or anything that we would want to answer?
Sorry, it froze when I came back up. Yeah, no, a couple comments in here. Fun platform technology. A couple comments. One was, in my experience, if you want AWS support on writing SCPs, asking the question in multiple tickets with AWS is the best approach, since support varies so widely among AWS teams. So it was like more a comment for the helpers on the call. And then one person asked if there was a way to show a before and after of applying the SCP in Security Hub, but you forget if you can actually enforce an update in Security Hub. So it was more, I don't know, question, comment maybe.
I don't use Security Hub a whole lot, so I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know, Christophe, if you use Security Hub much. I don't think there would be, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the statement is asking. If you don't mind clarifying, like whether you're asking looking at the score. That's my guess is what that means, is looking at the score in Security Hub for before you apply SCPs versus after. I'm not too sure if that's what it's referring to, though.
It could be. Yeah.
Yeah, if they clarify it, I'll jump in. We did just get one good question. Can you see the unauthorized event in CloudTrail? So when somebody gets a deny, can you see the unauthorized event?
Let's
It will
find out.
look, yeah, it'll look very similar to what you saw in the console in most cases. And so Christophe will bring one up here. Of course, you have to find the one that you're denied. It's probably that one, yeah. There's usually an error message right there, error message.
Access denied right here. It's so zoomed in that my eyes are like, whoa, this is massive text.
And one right
we have access denied right here for event name, create function URL, event source lambda, etc. So you can also see here the exact error message that we saw before. It'll tell you, hey, with an explicit deny in service control policy.
And 90% of the time, it will say that explicit deny with service control policy. Like I say, there are exceptions, but most of them will say that.
So here's the elaboration from Eric. Thank you, Eric, for answering and filling it back in. Usually when you're applying the SCPs, you're trying to get rid of a security hub finding. So you'd like to see the SCP applied and then the finding go away in security hub, and was saying that we thought we had mentioned the CIS benchmark, which would be in security hub.
I'll answer this in two ways, Eric. For most of the benchmark style findings that are in Security Hub are doing a discovery to look for the existence of a resource in AWS. So they're looking for a default VPC as an example. When you put this SCP in place that says deny the creation of default VPCs, it doesn't actually go through and delete the VPCs that are already there. So those Security Hub findings are going to stay. You'll still need to go clean those up. So that's the stuff that sits in your backlog, but you'll never end up with a net new one. So if you have 22 of them today, tomorrow you will still have 22 of them because people won't be able to keep adding to the problem as they go. So for those types of checks in Security Hub that are looking for a specific resource in AWS, the SCP will not remove those. I don't know, like Access Analyzer has some analysis of SCPs and understands from a risk perspective some of the stuff that's in these. I don't know if Security Hub, some of those findings may be coming from Access Analyzer, so those ones may actually, you'll get a better score or something on them if it's interpreting them that way.
Awesome. Great answer. You're welcome, Eric. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, great questions.
We went through the error code already, so we talked through that one. Sandy, I think we're all good on questions right now. If any more come in, I'll pop them up towards the end, but I know you had a slide you wanted to go through here at the end too.
Just one more, maybe, Christophe.
I can share back if you need me to.
I was just going to say on that last one, the number 5, because we didn't spend time on it. And as Christophe said, it's hard on the head. I actually had to think about it myself when I looked at this one after not looking at it for a while. What's interesting about this SCP is that you'll see in both statements, there's a deny and then a principal ARN, which is like my IAM assuming role. And if you scroll up top, you'll see the same one. And one is a kind of a deny statement, one's allow statement. What's interesting about this is you're creating basically one identity that's allowed to do something and then negating it so that all other identities are not allowed to do that. And so you can create this interesting separation of duties scenario that says, in this particular case, there's a very special identity in my accounts called, my IAM assuming roles that's allowed to do things like attach role policies and delete roles and attach user policies and can do IAM style functions. And then the other one basically says, if you are not that special role, you are not allowed to do it. I believe is what we were doing in this case. Or in this case, the IAM role is actually not allowed to do anything outside those functions. So sorry, we were trying to make sure that it is controlled and it's not allowed to go create an EC2 instance or things like that. You can use this style for all kinds of separation of duties examples. It doesn't have to be IAM related. If you want to make sure that the person that manages the KMS key cannot use the KMS key. If you want, there's all kinds of different examples you can use this this example for. And so it's extendable to other use cases, which is kind of fun too. But they are hard on your head. You have to really wrap your head around what's going on as you're doing these things, as you get into some of these denies with negative conditions on them. So anyway, just thought I'd mention that. It's a good template to start with if you're trying to do something like that for separation of duties. All right. Joseph, I will, I'm going to share one more time here. Let's go here. And of course, now you need to find that button again, which is share up top. Perfect. So I would just welcome anyone who's, attended the webinar. We're happy to share more SCPs with everybody as we go. Christophe, thank you. We actually built a platform called the Cloud Permissions Firewall, which implements a bunch of these things by default. And it, what's kind of neat about it is it finds all the exemptions so that it doesn't break anything when you're doing, instead of 5 or 6 of these permissions, you're doing, 1,000 of these permissions. And so if you're interested in something like that and you think your organization could use that to help scale your security and get your identities to least privilege very, very quickly versus trying to create new policies on everything, feel free to look us up at sonraisecurity.com/trial, and we have 14-day free trials for everyone. So again, would love to talk to anybody who's interested in such a thing. And with that, Joseph, I think we would sign off.
I think so too. Sandy, thanks so much for all your help. Christophe, thanks so much for all your help. We'll make sure to send out this recording to everyone that was here today, and feel free to share it with your colleagues or friends. We've attached in the chat as well a link to that free trial Sandy just mentioned and a link to the on-demand that we were talking about before as well. This one will, of course, be on demand as well, and we can include all of those links in that follow-up. So keep an eye out for an email from Sonrai Security. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for having me.
You guys, see ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.